How's everybody doing? Good. Just gonna let that last moment settle in a little bit. That was a heavy one, but I think it speaks to so much of why this conversation is broader than just about race. It's really about all of us in this room. Can I take this mic? And what we bring to this work, and what we want to see in the communities we live in. I hope to do a couple things during the time that I have. I think our conversation has been really heady. I think we've gotten some really solid concepts. But I want to go a little further. I hope to demystify a few things. I hope to bring this a little closer to each and every one of you in the room where you are, how you came here. And hopefully also maybe give a little bit of really just building an encouragement on, what can you do? I think when we, hear a term like white supremacy, we say, whoa, that's the guy in the tall, pointy hat with sheets, or somebody with symbols that represent killing people en masse because you think that they're really just not valued. But when you start digging into it, I like that Nicole has brought this into the room because I think it comes out in many different ways. It doesn't always have to be state-sponsored violence or some niche group that's really trying to do everything they can to promote people who they think look like them and who have the right to resources, land, and being able to live and prosper. But it goes a little further than that. It has an effect on what we all do and how we all experience the world, and I want to kind of get into some of that nuance. And then you're also going to get to see a little bit about me. Because I think I am inspired by both Nicole and Kate, and the way that they've wrapped that into the discussion and to talk about how you came to the work and why you're interested. I think it's so important that we give ourselves that space to think about that. This is just something we do at work. This is just sort of the movement and priorities of our organization. I think it is important to sort of understand that on a professional level, you can do something to influence disparities and other ways that we describe inequities. But I think it is also important to give yourself space to think about, when did I come to this conversation, this awareness? How do I want to be a part of it? And then think about, I know we got a little bit about, a parent perspective on, if I wanted to really make it personal, what does that mean? And I think that's not a very light subject, because I know in the conversations I've had at the foundation, I say first and foremost, we remember that, family is important. What people do with their time is important, and it's a lot to ask for people to go across long-held traditional borders and try to span boundaries between race and culture in the way that we situate our lives. I don't take that lightly. I don't think it's just as easy as going out and shaking hands with somebody you've never seen before. Or, it could be a little bit more simple than that. It could be reaching out to somebody that, you have in a network. But then we say, if we look at certain research, we know that social networks are segregated to the degree that they can prove that even in an online virtual space, that people's social networks are 90% people, particularly European Americans. Those social media networks are 90% of people who would be identified somewhat similar as those persons. So that just tells you how difficult it is. You don't even have, it's really been difficult to break those barriers when you don't have to share space with somebody. That's my blank slide. So I want to give you a chance. How much time do we have? I know we talked about, I'm going to try to stay on time here.
I got you.
All right, yeah, okay. So I want to give you a chance to just take a moment. I know you've been listening very intently. I want to give you a chance to just take a moment. We're going to have a couple of moments. I think if we want to open this up to discussion, I'll kind of get a pulse of the room on how that goes. But I want to invite you with your table mates to sort of think about this question and maybe share a few ideas with each other, share a few reflections with each other. Reflect on a time when you spoke out against something you thought was not right. When was it? What happened? Who did it happen to? What did you say? To whom did you say it? And was it in front of anyone? And if you didn't say anything, why didn't you? So let's give that a moment to kind of sink in and just sort of reflect on that. I'm going to invite you to share a couple of thoughts at your table.
You think it's from the white supremacy angle?
No, that's what I said. We're going to make it personal. Okay. It could be any sort of injustice, any sort of right you saw. Somebody got skipped in line. It could be you saw one of your classmates. They don't have to be of another race or identity characteristic. You could have just saw something wrong happen. So I want to just invite you to reflect on sometime that you saw something that you thought was not right. So I give you oh, I'm sorry.
So I'm going to make some impressions on my table. Today I'm going to be practicing so a lot of the stuff is like so I'm trying to there's a lot of stuff but I will say is like also that brings a customer in line. I work as a once when I saw the manager berating lots of stuff. And so I called her out in front of a very full and it was really upset. But I felt like check that person in front of her screen. And so as I wondered what was going to happen because it was very shocking for that person. It was all in a very public way. And I could see the faces of people somebody standing next to us, and then the rest of the customers were like, like kind of cheering. So it was a really weird moment that I feel like I need to say, but I never, and it's like I'm a frequenter of the
Okay, maybe take about another 30 seconds.
In my goal to become more environmentally friendly, completely overlooked that people
So as we sort of close off that spot of the conversation,
with the disability community have
I wish I could give you all my time. Because I think these kind of conversations give us a chance to, just think about the day-to-day experiencing it.
It's an assistive, it's a low cost assistive.
Well, that'll take me 10 minutes. So I got another question. So let me pose this. Let me just put up the next question. You can kind of keep talking. You'll have another 2 minutes to talk. But somebody told me once that leadership was not so much about what position you have or your ability to follow others. I've heard that one. Or your ability to tell people what to do. They talked about leadership is about being able to do something in the face of opposition in a way, or to be able to speak up when speaking up might not be what's natural in that setting. Because we all know that there's an idea that we kind of all hold that we don't want to sort of stick our heads above water. In school, it comes out in bullying. If you stick up for that kid that's getting bullied, you might become a target. If the person in the meeting says something that's not sort of agreed upon, we see this probably in our, people sort of stand back and wait. People say something that might be not necessarily in line with what the next person up in the hierarchy is. Uh-oh, watch out. We're not going to keep behind that until we see what happens. So, being able to develop that muscle and be able to recognize when something isn't right and being able to say something about it and have the strength within to do that when it's not necessarily what's encouraged or would be sort of accepted is part of what this work entails. So we're going to get to keep talking a little bit in the tables. So we're going to move on. So you can keep talking about the previous question around when you saw something that wasn't right, what happened, what did you do? But I want you to wrap in this too. Let's reflect a little more. When's the first time you heard the term equity and social justice in a professional setting? I use those specifically as opposed to diversity and inclusion because I think diversity and inclusion was sort of one phase, but I think when we start talking about equity and social justice, as Nicole pointed out, it's something a little bit different. And it asks for a little bit more of us. Do you think you have a good idea what equity or social justice means? How do you demonstrate it? What about culture? What comes to mind when you hear culture? How might it be relevant to equity and social justice conversations? Go! Any one of those.
On the previous. I don't remember when this was, but
so everybody at the table probably will get to share, but I'm just going to ask what's going on, just to have a little conversation.
The cartoon with the boxes.
So it's okay, you don't have an idea about it, it's okay.
So again, I don't know when that was exactly, but I just remember that being such a prevalent culture depiction of what it meant.
Prior to, say, like 4 or 5 years ago. That's been around for a while.
When I saw it, so I don't know.
Equity has been more present in our and the founders are like, oh, I'm like, I don't know where you're going. No, like, wait a minute. Like, we have to have like, well, we have to sorry, I don't know. Go on.
About that time, I don't
I should have said it's great to talk about it.
Still let me feel that way.
They already feel they respond to what we like. We should do something different.
Culture is funny because to me, I think when a lot of people, especially if you go from a more white background, culture is like kind of culture. And it's like, oh, and that's the culture. But it's never white culture, like that becomes a little more comfortable when you frame it that way. I'm just curious to know.
Suggestion given. So actually, I tried to identify people to light it.
So let's talk about really meaning.
Should
start closing out our thoughts. That gives you the chance to have gotten to know a little bit about the people at your table, sort of spark your mind. Being prepped to be in these kind of conversations. And I love to hear the excitement and sort of willingness that you all open up really quickly with each other on this topic. It's really important that we find that space for ourselves to do that. Because we often don't get time for ourselves. We're so, at least now just sort of maybe make a broad statement about this room, you know, that we're so busy in our daily lives trying to demonstrate that we know what we're doing, our competence, performing, that we don't, you know, sort of think about these things on a personal level. And so I want to get personal with me and share that embarrassing photo. It's not so embarrassing, but this is me, I would say, in my young lion years. I'm about 40 now. I joke about, you know, hoping that I have about as much time in front of me as I did behind me. You start sort of looking back at what you were doing in your early 20s and like that. So I wasn't a rapper necessarily. I was making my guest performance here. These two guys on the side were rapper guys, but you know, this was a part of what was going on. I went to school at UW-Madison. I was fortunate to have that experience. I'm from Milwaukee originally. I would say I'm from a working class background. It was just had a lot of fortunate experience. I'll get into some of that really quickly, but I put this up here because I look back and say, man, like, what was I doing all this time? You say, I've had people say, like, Lamont, I thought you were this guy from Boston that they flew in to be at the foundation to solve problems. Oh man, I guess I learned how to code switch pretty good. That's a part of my story. And I say this was also me. Around the same time, I had friends in college that I knew from high school. I was one of those people who was fortunate enough to have, you know, meaningful experiences with people who were different than me. I grew up in a home. My mom's from Milwaukee. Was born in 1954. She grew up in 54th and Galena. She was a foster child, never adopted, born in the state her whole life. A lot of people would see her and say, oh wow, you know, she might be able to so-called pass as black because she grew up in a black family, an alcoholic family. One by today's standards would have been abusive. She spent her summers in Cairo, Illinois, which is in the southern tip of Illinois, slopping hogs in summertime. And she raised me like a farm kid. And some of you know what that means. So discipline was first and foremost. And I knew my dad. My parents were married. They had me a little bit later, but my dad graduated from high school, youngest of 5 brothers, 1968. He grew up in a town, who knows about the Freedom Ride?
Yeah.
Who's ever seen that image of the bus smoking, burning, blown up? That's the town he grew up in. Graduated from high school in 1968, youngest of 5. I have an uncle who's living right now that lived through Jim Crow, Alabama. So that's how I grew up. I had a racial consciousness from a young age. I understood what it meant to have my life in danger. And you know, growing up at that age, when I had my little tie on, you can't really see it, but I got my Return of the Jedi step up there. Kicking big time. I love it when some of these pictures my mom would bring out of me. You know, she told me about posse comitatus. Who knows what that is?
Yes.
You know what that is?
Yes.
Yeah. She told me about that age. You know, it's posse comitatus in Wisconsin. Armed militias. It's in the state statute still. These are the people who are the Ku Klux Klan down south, but it's legal. Okay. What else can I tell you about that time? In any case, Eyes on the Prize is another one. If you want to do some deep learning and don't like to get into books, Eyes on the Prize came out maybe 3 years after that. I would say it's a great primer. It's a long series. If you find it, you want to get in deep and take it.
Get it on Netflix.
What's on Netflix now?
No, I'm sorry, Amazon Prime. You can buy it.
Amazon Prime. So I suggest if you want to do some learning on the history, I think that's something that people bring up now. Well, how do we learn about history? What is it? You know, what is on the racial question anyway? That's a great one. So that's kind of how I grew up. There was really no question to me that you know, when I went to a space, I got a chance to go to. Fortunate for me, got a chance to experience all parts of Milwaukee. Milwaukee's super segregated. I was aware of that too. But I got a chance to be a part of integrated busing. That's part of my story. Second generation kids integrated busing at Glendale River Hill School District. I would have went to Nicolay, but you know, my mom got to know like a little bit of how that system, that policy mechanism, okay, that's being used to alleviate segregation. but they were just taking the money, sounds familiar, and they were tracking kids who were from the city into lower tracks and they never had a chance to get the upper level education. She's like, nah, my sister went to Nicolay, they tried to track her, not tracking me. Fortunately for me, I'm 7 years younger than my sister. Serendipitously, my parents tried to get me involved in a lot of activities. And so through just this crazy chain of events, I ended up going to university school as a kid for my baseball team. His dad ended up being a trustee there. 6 years later, they called my parents. You kid, son want to go to this school? Give him a chance. Had to take an entrance exam. Cool, no problem. Fortunately, I was one of those kids that kind of, I had my phone screwed up, but I knew a little bit too. So I got a chance to go to one of the best high schools in the state. And that ended up being the reason why I ended up in UW-Madison. I put this up here because you start thinking like, man, how did I come to this work? Well, officially, formally, I was doing this work 20 years ago. Really didn't think of it that way. We're just student activists on campus doing a bunch of stuff. I'm gonna ask for a little more time because I gave some of my time, okay? I won't tell you much. So we were dealing with resources back then. 36095 state statute, students had the right to basically administer student fees, use a student government. Back in the early 2000s, we could see the remnants. I'm kind of showing this a little bit because this is a big deal. You see that number right there? $500,000. Multicultural program at UW-Madison campus. That was a big deal back then. I showed this to my wife now. She said, 10 hours of deliberations. I would be the chair of the finance committee. And when I saw this at the time, I was aware of Birth of the Nation. I was like, oh man, this is a Birth of the Nation moment. So I used to make a point, although, I didn't mind wearing formal attire, but the culture piece was important to me back then, that I should be able to wear hip hop gear and administer responsibly the funds of the students. Now, there's a whole big backstory to that. It's a crazy story. I think some people kind of have some awareness of this story, but a lot going on this time. And I even got to talk about this. Student newspaper, this is 2002 now. That other one was fall of 2001. So what's interesting about that, that date should sound familiar. November 1st, 2001, but what just happened? I mean, we just had a very major shock. And so did the fabric of our country right 2 months before that. So here we are talking about ideological diversity, and we have something that shocks the fabric of the country. And I would say even at that time, it was a big deal, but it's probably a bigger deal now. As we've sort of layered on these stories around what it means for people's place here, and who should be considered what and where and when and why. So it's funny that I didn't know it. I had to unlearn part of some of the things that you do learn as you navigate. Navigating the system changes you in some ways. So you go through and you adopt, as Nicole referenced, you adopt some of those mentalities. You don't even know it. And so even in talking about culture, I want to share a little story. I'm thinking I'm a student activist, I know what's going on. And I was raised on this stuff. And on State Street in Madison, many of you know it's pedestrian street, lots of students. But also, I think what used to be fascinating to me is that people didn't see people of other cultures. Because the student diversity was so low. But you used to see people who would be indigent or homeless. Particularly African Americans. You wouldn't see barely any African American students, but you would no African American adults downtown, but you would definitely see some homeless people that African American. I'm just thinking to myself, I had classmates that would tell me, you're the first African American person I've ever been in a room with. I'm saying, all they're seeing is homeless people. And what is that doing for their image, of what it means to be specifically African American? Not just speaking from that perspective, knowing that, there's much diversity. So one day, I used to joke that I was very approachable, and I don't know why. And I would stop and talk sometimes to people who would, that's a privilege of mine, I would talk to sometimes to some of the guys that they, really trying to impress upon me something. Not just that, they would ask me for money, but some of them, nah, man, I can't do that. But like, man, what. And so one time this guy stops me and he says, like, what are you doing? What are you doing on campus? I said, yeah, man, we're trying to do something about the injustice. He's like, man, this place, man, the system is this. I'm saying, well, we're trying to do something about it. we're on campus trying to improve campus climates for students of color. We're trying to, do something for students of color on campus and people of color. He was like, man, I'm from Detroit, from the projects, man. He was older than me. He said, man, you know how long we've been trying to stop being called color? I was like, whoa. You got me, bro. I just had to admit it. I thought I knew. Even in being down, you know what I'm saying? But he had a different perspective on it. That's what we're talking about with cultural responsive practice. People have different perspectives, even within groups that would be perceived as similar. Stop zooming. So I wanted to talk a little bit about it. We'll make these available, but when we're talking about culture, I was going to treat culture a little bit, but we're really talking about, what are those sort of core things and norms that make up ourselves. I would say that some of those examples, interpersonal communication, courtesy in public, social conventions around time. There's a whole bunch of things. I encourage you to go out and read up on culture, norms, beliefs, and values. These things that bind groups of people together. Now, the one that we know about most is race. But we know that if we get into it, things are, the mind is interesting, and groups of people are interesting. Because when you get into culture, you start talking about intended culture, mimic culture, and then cultural construction. And if anybody heard that term social construct, people construct meaning around what they see. So when we talk about race, it's a social construct. There's nothing biological about it. I think it's important to note that. And I would say that many other identity characteristics, they're real in the sense that people operate on them, but we got to remember that these are things that are projected upon people, and oftentimes those definitions are not created by those people that receive those projected images. So at one time, somebody said, well, look at these people, they look different. And that means that they're not smart, they're evil, they will hurt our women, so on and so forth. So we're talking about racial equity and white supremacy. These are some of the basics. But when you dig into it a little further, we see even on an interpersonal basis, we start getting into how does culture differentiate people? Pierre Bourdieu is a French philosopher. These guys really love to sort of break this stuff down. We start talking about some of those, I think, starts getting to the intersectionality points. But some is functional, how culture functions. Who gets to say what, when, and where? These things are pretty much fixed. Tends towards hierarchy. So that's what we're talking about at CRE. How do we break down that hierarchy, and who do we listen to, and who do we think's opinions matter? I think many of us have had those situations where either we felt like we weren't being heard, or just felt like we were just talking to a brick wall. These are real things because if you dig into it a little deeper, I've been doing a little bit of research on basically what would be sort of white culture, I would say, so-called white culture, which is really American European culture. And there's great treatments of this around how you can trace American culture to four folk traditions or ways of doing things from England. The South governed by Southern and Western England, the Cavalier. These people were conquered at one time by France, and they sort of bring this idea of this business class of strict hierarchy around who's important and everybody else, and that cut across race. Okay, you get the Puritan tradition from New England, which starts talking about how important it was for those people who came here to maintain the status of that group that came here. They were preserving themselves, and I think when you dig into that white supremacy descriptions, think about that. How much is it important for you to maintain solidarity with your group? And I would say on the racial question, a lot of things have happened because particularly descendants of Africans here were not even considered. So it wasn't even that people were, they might have faced some violence, but by and large, they weren't even, people of mine, what I would associate with my ancestry, weren't even considered in the conversation. They were just, that's what other means. Okay? Now if I was to bring it home to today, what you're really faced with is this. We're talking about doing things in communities that face disparities. I like to use pictures now. And here I'm trying to depict what happens when we have these cultural lenses and what the challenge is in being accurate when we get into the CRE discussion, being accurate, being transformative. Funders will look upon things with a cultural lens and they'll have their trusted partners and they'll look at the community issues and they'll get fed through a cultural lens and will view issues a certain way. And the key is those issues as we view them in this space might not be reality. And that's the challenge of CRE. And that's why we need to diversify in that sense, culturally, having people from the community involved so they can give you an accurate perception. And I'll just leave this up here as sort of a picture of what we want to do. We often get caught up in the idea that we want, this is blue and purple, that if we just get the right mix of blue and purple people in with the green people, it's going to be fine. But in this day and era, 2019, people have mentalities. We talk about, sort of being able to survive and thrive and sort of be malleable. So you can be a purple person thinking like a green person, like a funder. We want to make sure that we're able to get people who have enough time to learn on this funding perspective, get deep, reflect on yourself, those things about culture and yourself, learn about others, learn how you're going to create that shared vision, and most importantly, how are you going to include those people that we're working with in the work. So it's not enough just to do input, because we filter that too. I have another one I've developed that when you get input, that goes through a filter lens too. But people have to be a part of doing the work. They have to have a portion in the work that's just not subordinate in the work. Okay? So we're talking about the experience, the lived experience of people in the communities we're trying to help. So I'll leave you with that. Thanks for giving me a little extra time. I hope, we sort of got a chance to bring this a little bit more personal, but I'll issue that as a challenge to you. When you interact with people that are different than you, how are you checking your cultural bearings, and how are you creating a space for people to participate in the work as well? Thank you.